Good evening. This is Jonathan Spears. I'm doing my presentation for Business 343 Foundations of Business Ethics. I chose the case study for unprofessional conduct. Um, so, the case study is about a Mrs. Petit. She was a teacher back in the 70s. At the time, she had been teaching for about 13 years, and she was busted by an undercover police officer for having untraditional marriage with her husband. They had an open relationship, and they were part of a swingers group. As a result of which, she was fired from her job. Her teaching credentials were later renewed, but it was temporary as the Board of Education ended up terminating them again. And so the case event. After everything, after the initial event, she had gotten terminated, and then while she was back into teaching, she had actually went on two television shows incognito and told about her unconventional, sexual lifestyles, wearing a disguise. But she ended up getting found out by somebody who had worked with her. She was part of the club called the Swingers and participated in a variety of different activities. She was at a private residence when the undercover police officer had found them, and she was arrested, charged with copulation, which at the time was illegal for anybody. Now it's just minors. And as I'd mentioned, her license was renewed the following school year, but then later revoked again. Disciplinary proceedings were initiated 2 years later due to immoral and unprofessional conduct. So some of the case events on behalf of the principal gave Miss Petit satisfactory evaluations the entire time of her teaching career, never had any complaints regarding her teaching standards, and it's unclear as to when he learned of her or extracurricular activities. Sergeant Burke, the individual who actually caught them as the undercover agent. So he joined the club as the undercover agent. He witnessed Miss Petit with three separate men and arrested her for copulation. And then he testified at the school board hearing for her revocation of her license due to immoral and unprofessional conduct. The State Board of Education initiated a separate investigation against Mrs. Petit regarding immoral and unprofessional behavior, revoking her teaching license, ending her career, and the state and stated that she was unfit to teach based on her actions. And three school administrators, more specifically, three superintendents, actually all came out to testify against her, all stating that she was unfit to teach. And the questions were regarding her views as being subjected to kids in the classroom. And so this actually went all the way up to the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court upheld the decision of the state. And this was actually very similar to an unrelated case, which was another teacher who was declared unfit to teach due to their homosexuality. However, in that case, the teacher was reinstated as his preference was deemed private. And that kind of gets into the meat and potatoes as to why this is such a ethical dilemma. So, all right. So ethical issues at the individual level. Miss Petit should have should have some degree of privacy to do as she pleases behind closed doors or at a private residence. The State Board of Education found no reason to complain about her services as a teacher, and conceded she would likely to be unlikely to repeat her sexual misconduct. She had no past misconduct with students or suggest any future problems to occur. At the time of arrest, copulation was completely illegal. However, she pled to a lesser misdemeanor charge not covered as a terminable offense, and her activities took place at a private residence where the undercover agent or where the undercover officer attended. So everything was private, and everything seems to be very similar in that it was her own personal decision that, and the charge wasn't even covered within her clause of moral obligation. So on the organizational level, moral decision making boiled down to a philosophical difference of perspective. Miss Petit was accused of acting immoral and lacking ability to act as a moral example. License, again, it was renewed, but then again indicted. And as a practical basis for discussing moral issues within an organization. All right, so we could move past that. And then going into the societal level. So the obligations, the effects, and the ideals. So, where this gets a little dicey is, a lot of this does kind of come down to um, one own's personal view or one own's personal philosophy, and where the society is supposed to sit, and who they're supposed to deem as what's right and what's wrong. But the obligations, so specific duties and moral responsibilities that we have in a given situation, the effects, the ideals. All right, so and then the ethical issues at the societal level. Ms. Petit should have considered her obligations, moral clause, licensing, disqualification procedures, work performance evaluations, and public perceptions. Ms. Petit's actions led to her job being affected. Her television interviews, both of them, even though they were in disguise, were seen by a coworker who was able to still recognize her. Her membership to the club was what initially led to her being arrested, and her choice for her personal activities caused her to lose her teaching career. Her cultural ideas did not pair with the organizational or the societal at that time of morality, and the investigation against her ended in her losing her ability to teach, regardless of her job performance. So, in the libertarian kind of point of view, the ideal is typically that you should be able to live your own life so long as you're not bothering anybody else. You're not going to be bothered. Given the assumption that liberty means non-interference, libertarians generally agree that liberty allows only a minimal or night watchman state, such a state limited to the narrow functions protecting its citizens against force, theft, and fraud, enforcing contracts, and performing other such basic maintenance functions. So, typically that's where I tend to fall, but I could see why this would be a little bit harder to narrow down as to what would be right or wrong. Obviously, there's other things that, or even in this, if a person was a member of, a specific group, I could absolutely understand why a lot of people wouldn't want them to be teaching. And there's a lot of groups that are out there that if a teacher was a member of, I wouldn't want them to be teaching as well. So I could see why this is a lot more of a dilemma. So, so in the slides, we also cover the other possible outcomes, all the alternative actions on all the different from all the different parties, and then also the alternative perceptions, solutions, and even feedback. So so in conclusion, where did I go? Okay, so I guess I'll cut it there. Running a little bit low on time. Yeah, I guess we're gonna call it before we hit the 10 minutes. Once again, my name is Jonathan Spears, and this is for Business 343, which is instructed by Professor Leah Nuevo Chow. Thank you very much.